So, Terrence Malick. You can see my thoughts on trying to make Terrence Malick into something a bit more mainstream, which I'm sure failed miserably here. Otherwise, I'm just going to get straight to the rankings. Now, I just have to preface this with I don't really do ties. I did a tie at the top of my Best Picture winners list because the top 3 movies there were in my top 10 of all time list, and I refused to rank those, so I just had them tie at the top. I have a tie here as well. And I'm not getting around it. I love the tie, the movies that tie at a level that I can't differentiate. It's there. And you wonder, well, David, there is this S tier list thing that you could use, and I hate the S tier list. I don't really know why. I just do. I also hate rankings, but whatever. Let's just get right into it. So, Terrence Malick, a top 7 of 10 movies. Number 7 is Knight of Cups, and this is Terrence Malick's ode to Los Angeles and how much he hates the city. It's the only movie he made in Los Angeles, and it is entirely about how much he genuinely seems to hate the materialism of the modern movie-making world. So it follows Christian Bale's character, who is largely voiceless, as he wanders around Los Angeles, picking up women, dropping them, treating them like objects, and treating them like the spare objects that he has in his apartment, and then just kind of moving on to the next one. It's extremely obvious how this film was put together. Malick had access to Christian Bale for a few days at a time over the course of months, and then he had access to individual actors and actresses to throw him in a scene with them at the same time. And so we have a series of fairly famous names like Cate Blanchett, who never meet any of the other female characters. And so Terrence Malick kind of built a movie about disconnection because he was making a movie that was completely disconnected in terms of its production. That's my theory. The effort to actually try to make something cohesive out of the footage he had ended up just lending itself to the place where all he could do was create a movie about disconnection. And I think it works. I don't love the film. I don't feel like it has a real emotional punch. But the stitch work that Malick does in the editing bay is fairly obvious. And I think it actually ends up just benefiting the film because every time an actress shows up, like Cate Blanchett or Natalie Portman or Teresa Palmer, they are really only there for a few minutes, and then they're going to have moments where Christian Bale has fun with them and then just kind of drops them once things get serious. And in the end, there's only one place for Malick to take this, and it's for Christian Bale to flee Los Angeles. It's ultimately a condemnation of materialism in the modern world, in particular Los Angeles, and you just get this real distinct feeling that Malick hates Los Angeles. It amuses me. But the movie itself, I think, is interesting. I don't find it the most engrossing thing in the world, but it's interesting, and I like it. I think it's pretty good. I think it's his least film, but I do think it's pretty good. Number 6 is Days of Heaven. Now, I think most people who have dug into Terrence Malick's work feel like Days of Heaven is one of his best, and consistently over the decades. I have always felt a weird reserve against it. Just I can't quite get to it emotionally. After the incredible highs of Badlands, this feels like there's a weird disconnect between me and what's going on. And I think the source of that is the fact that the voiceover in this film is done by Linda, the younger sister of Bill, played by Richard Gere. Linda is played by Linda Mance, and she doesn't seem to have any real emotional connection to absolutely anything that happens in the movie at all. So the story is of Bill and Abby. They're a couple, and Linda, they have to flee from Chicago after Bill accidentally kills a foreman in the steel mill he's working. They end up in the Texas Panhandle, and they end up working for the farmer, played by Sam Shepard. And Bill comes up on a scheme because the farmer has been told he has a year to live, and so Bill says, well, Abby, you need to get close to the farmer and marry him so that when he dies, we can, inherit everything. And so all of the drama is around that. It's around Bill watching Abby fall for the farmer. It's about the farmer falling for Abby while realizing that there's something weird about this relationship between Abby and Bill, who say they're brother and sister. And Linda's viewing it all and giving us her take on it, but it's so disconnected from it emotionally that I feel like it ends up acting as a certain barrier emotionally to what's going on. I can't get into it, and I think it's because of the actual voiceover. I've seen this movie 3 times. I always have this kind of very reserved take on it, and I think it's that. The movie, though, is absolutely gorgeous. It touches on all of Malick's themes, especially around the idea of Eden and kind of the fallen nature of man. And it's a good film. I really do think it's a good film. It's the story progresses clearly and makes sense. This is long before Malick had decided just to kind of throw out the rule book on plot. And I think it works. I feel a certain distance from the action. I wish that distance wasn't there, but I've seen the movie multiple times. I have really tried, and that distance remains. And so I end up admiring the film instead of actually loving it, but the admiration is great. It is a good film. I wish I could love it. Number 5 is To the Wonder. This is the film that Malick made immediately after The Tree of Life, and The Tree of Life was 3 in a trilogy of epic films, very large productions. That took a long time to put together, and then within about a year after the end of The Tree of Life, he had released To the Wonder. So it seems like an effort to try to just kind of up his production and post-production schedule, and I think it works really well. I do think it could have used another 6 months to a year in the editing bay, maybe filming some new stuff, because there is a major subplot. It's hard to call them subplots, but there's a major smaller section of the film that I feel should have been grander, but instead feels very small. And I think that contrast in scope is what works so well in The Tree of Life and then doesn't quite work as well here. I still really like the movie. So it's the story of Neil, played by Ben Affleck. He meets a woman in France named Marina, played by Olga Kurylenko, and they fall in love, and he brings her to Oklahoma. They bring her and her daughter along with her to Oklahoma. And Neil is not the kind of person to give a lot in a relationship, and this woman who finds herself alone in a strange land struggles to adapt. And Neil ends up having an affair with Rachel McAdams, a woman he knew in high school. And, it's this tug and push of love in its different manifestations as, what is Neil trying to achieve and what is Marina looking for and what does she need, especially since she seems to be suffering from depression, especially after her daughter ends up going back to France with her own father. It's surprisingly touching. This is Malick really pushing his production methods, you're just trying to capture moments and stitch everything together in editing, and I think it works really well. Where I feel like things don't measure up quite as well is with Javier Bardem's character, who's Father Quintana. He is obviously a Catholic priest who does interact with Marina and try to help things, but his realization, his struggles with faith, they end up feeling kind of small in comparison to the romance stuff, which is an interesting contrast to The Tree of Life, where the Jessica Chastain character just asks God, where are you and what are you doing? And then we get the creation sequence. Instead we have, Quintana kind of muddling through his religious issues and it serving the same purpose, but just not having the same grand scope. So it works. It has a certain structural and narrative purpose and thematic purpose, but ultimately it doesn't have the same impact as something like The Tree of Life. Overall, the film, I think, is really good. The meat of it is around the relationship between Neil and Marina. I think that works wonderfully well. I just kind of wish that the extra stuff that's supporting it was grander. Other than that, the movie's really good. Number 4 is Song to Song. Now, this is the third in Terrence Malick's Ennui trilogy, and I do think it is the best. I think this movie is great. I love this movie. It is everything about his new production efforts, just trying to capture emotional moments and kind of nothing else, stitching them together, and then finding a way to make something emotionally and thematically resonant happen. And I think it works incredibly well. So it's the story of four people around the Austin music scene. The center of it all is Michael Fassbender's character called Cook. He's essentially just the devil. He is the tempter, and he leads hedonistic lifestyles to try to drive wedges between people. And so, he takes Ryan Gosling and Rooney Mara, who are something of a couple in the beginning, as well as Natalie Portman, who starts the film as a waitress, and he brings them into his orbit, and he starts corrupting them by, he takes, there's a trip to Mexico that is kind of the central Eden motif within the film, but then there's also this effort to just try to drive wedges between relationships. So the Cook is trying to have an affair with Rooney Mara, but he's also married to Natalie Portman and bringing Natalie Portman into this hedonistic lifestyle as his. And so this creates these disconnects between Ryan Gosling and Rooney Mara. And the movie isn't ultimately about temptation. It's ultimately about mercy and forgiveness. And so all of these little threads are about breaking people apart. But then the last act of the film is about people finding ways to reconnect and to forgive. And this is where the movie just kind of gets me. I buy into how Terrence Malick presents characters, and so as I watch them kind of reconnect and come back together and forgive each other, it feels wonderful. And I think the film has this wonderful ending that is a very strong case for how he makes his movies, because Ryan Gosling ends up in an oil field by the end. He ends up just working in an oil field. He gives up on the music scene and he goes and he works in an oil field. And there is absolutely no filmed element to cover the gap between them. He's suddenly there. However, I really feel like the sudden jump to him out of the life, in a literal sense, he's not there anymore. After he has made his reconnection with Rooney Mara, it's not necessary to have that literal, oh, I've given up all of my things in Austin and I'm moving to the Panhandle to work in oil field. We're done. This is my new life, and I find it emotionally resonant. It's wonderful. I think by this point, Terrence Malick had been largely written off, especially this little trilogy of films. People had written him off as just, he's lost the plot, literally. There are no plots in these films. And he's just kind of moved on into just doing self-pretentious stuff. And I buy into it. I genuinely get emotionally connected to these things, and I love it. And I think it works marvelously well. I think this is a complete hidden gem. I think people have unfairly maligned it, and I absolutely love it. I think this movie is great. Number 3 is Badlands. I think this is one of the great debut films from a filmmaker. It is incredibly intelligent, it is incredibly soulful, it is incredibly beautiful, and it is the product of a completely botched production. Malick kept running out of money, someone got injured and he couldn't afford an ambulance. It was kind of a disaster of a production. And you don't see it at all in the film. The film is seamless and absolutely beautiful. So it's the story of Holly, played by Sissy Spacek, and Kit, played by Martin Sheen. And Martin Sheen is essentially just Charlie Starkweather. He picks up Holly and he just starts killing people. He has no real reason to, he just does it because he's a complete psychopath. But Martin Sheen plays him with such incredible charm that he ends up, there's a great scene at the end where he has been captured and he's surrounded by policemen and he is just charming the pants off of them in chains, and it's kind of wonderful to watch. But the film is ultimately, I say all of this, and there's a certain emotional disconnect here that I still feel with Days of Heaven, but this is more of an intellectual exercise at the same time. There's kind of more of a thematic point going on, and it's really about the emptiness of the modern age and the emptiness of materialism. Kit is a nihilist. He's no beliefs, so why not just kill someone for no reason? And Holly is just along for the ride. She is complete innocent. She doesn't actually do anything along the trip, and she's just kind of falling in love with this complete psychopath, this complete charming psychopath. And it's really interesting to watch this deconstruction of how the modern world provides no real meaning, about how it's all really empty. And, you know, you have to go to Terrence Malick's Obvious Faith as kind of a source where he's looking at the modern world. He's seeing someone like Charlie Starkweather, a real person in the 50s who went around just killing people in the American Midwest-ish area. And there's no reason for it. And, you know, laying the blame on the modern world, saying this is the fault of people who have left behind the things that I personally believe. And it's incredibly engrossing in that way. It's a short film, it's a beautiful film, it's wonderfully acted by everyone involved. Warren Oates has a very nice performance very early as Holly's father. Terrence Malick actually gave himself a small role because his actor didn't show up one day. And you know what? It's kind of just a wonderful, intellectually involving film that's just beautiful to look at from beginning to end, and just like never really lets your attention go. I absolutely love this film. This film is great. Number 2 is A Hidden Life. This is this true story of Franz Jagerstatter, an Austrian conscientious objector who was arrested by German authorities during World War II for refusing to take the oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler, tortured and eventually executed. And he was beatified a couple of decades ago by the Catholic Church, and he's kind of an important small figure within the Catholic mythos of the last 100 years. And I adore this film. The ending of the film has me in an absolute puddle, but it is 45 minutes too long. And that 45 minutes is really in like the first hour and a half or so. The film is almost 3 hours long. It really reminds me of the extended cut of The New World, which I just feel like is way too long. Still love it, but it's like, it's just too long, and I prefer the shorter cut. I really wish someone had talked Malick into a theatrical cut. Something that was 2 hours 10 or so, you know, cut out a solid 30, 45 minutes of it, and kind of and just everything that feels too much is the constant drumbeat of "you are a traitor" that happens to him early in the film, where he first makes it known that he's not going to take the oath, and then his priests, the people in the town, the civil leaders in the town, they all turn against him. It just feels like a little too much. It kind of goes on for too long. However, outside of that, the movie is marvelous. It is absolutely gorgeous, filmed in the Alps. Franz and his wife Fanny have this marvelous relationship. Fanny does not understand his obstinacy at all, but she supports him completely. And so when he's under arrest, she's the only one to actually give him support. And there are these great moments late where we hear letters between them, you know, actual text from the letters that, you know, the real Franz and Franny shared with each other. And it is crushingly sad, and I absolutely adore the film. And you know, Malick takes the religious aspects even further by having specifically 3 temptations while he's in prison. There's the priest, there's the German interrogator, and then there's the lawyer. And they're all actively trying to tempt him into doing what will violate his conscience, which mimics the 3 temptations of Jesus by the devil in the desert. It's, you know, this is very intelligent stuff. It's wonderful, and it has this marvelous emotional swell at the end as we watch the inevitable happen. And I just have to take a moment because there's some marketing around it and some reactions to it that are completely nonsensical, where they're saying, oh, you know, this one man's sacrifice made a difference. And the fact of the matter is, what is made very clear in the film is the sacrifice doesn't make a difference to anyone except for him. It's the only sacrifice that matters, that will be felt, will be by him and his family who lose their father. And he ends up feeling like it's worth it because he is preserving his own soul. And that is the emotional catharsis. It's not that his death led to a revolution. It didn't. His death was forgotten for decades. And it's the fact that he preserved his own soul. And, you have to draw a parallel with someone like St. Thomas More, who just said, all right, fine, I'm going to accept this no matter what. This story of Jagerstatter is beautiful, and it absolutely leaves me in a puddle by the end, but it is solidly 45 minutes too long. Just take that in mind. I love it, but damn it, Terry, cut 45 minutes out. Now, to talk about the tie real quick. Again, I don't do ties, except where I absolutely feel like I have no other choice, and this is one of those, I think it's two I've ever done. The three movies here, if you've watched my top 10 movies of all time, you should already know this. But it's going to be The Thin Red Line, The New World, and The Tree of Life. The three movies that could be considered his epics. I find all three of them incredibly emotionally involving, and they crush me emotionally, absolutely crush me. Why tie them? Because we're at a level of masterpiece, in my opinion, that I refuse to delineate. I feel like almost no filmmakers alive have come close to this level of grandeur and emotional, catharsis and feeling. These movies are like masterpieces of masterpieces, and I simply refuse to delineate between them. They hit me the same way at the same level, and it's such an elevated level that I very, very rarely feel from anyone else, that I cannot distinct. I cannot break them up. It's just, they are there. It is top three. So boom, it's all one. So let's get to it. The first number one is The Thin Red Line. I'm doing these in chronological order. There's no other order to do them in. I spoke about this in my top 10 of all time, so I'm not going to go too long on this, but this movie, this was the first Terrence Malick movie I ever watched. This was the first Terrence Malick movie that really got me, and I absolutely still love it. I've seen it, like 10 times, and every single time I am just swept up in this story of Jim Caviezel, who was a side character in the original production, brought forward in the edit as the main character, and I completely buy into everything about it. The lost Eden of the little native island, and kind of people struggling against this, the nature of violence versus the nature of man versus the nature of grace. It's never quite that explicit in here, but it's definitely there. All of these ideas spinning around, manifested within individual characters, and ultimately how we're left with, this is just how the world works, and it's sad, and we have to find our own way towards grace, even if it leads to our own destruction. And I completely buy into it every single time I watch it. I think it's marvelously made. I think it's one of the most, the first big battle within the grassy hills is one of the most beautiful battle sequences ever filmed. It's on such a technical level that I absolutely kind of I never break from the reality. Everyone is just operating at the highest levels in terms of their performances. Just the little cameos by the major stars, perhaps are a little bit of a distraction, but I just do not care at that point. This movie is fantastic. I absolutely love it. And it was my gateway into Terrence Malick, and I thank him for that. The second number one is The New World. Specifically the theatrical cut. I have seen the two other cuts, and the theatrical cut is my favorite. I think it packs the most emotional punch. So this is obviously the story of Pocahontas after she meets John Smith, her relationship with James Rolfe, and then her eventual death in England. And much like the ending of A Hidden Life, I'm a puddle by the end. This movie hits me hard. And this is one of the most overt versions of the idea of the Lost Eden within Terrence Malick's body of work. It is about, Virginia before the English settlers, about how it was just this moment in time of just pure innocence that is ultimately lost. And, you can easily say that this is kind of the image of Virginia before the arrival of the English is really filtered through how Pocahontas sees it. She is the first person we see in the film, just very briefly in an introductory shot, but everything about the arrival of the English is told through her. So, it's the kind of the noble savage myth. It's also the whole just the innocence of youth idea. It's kind of everything tied into one. I don't think Malick takes the noble savage thing terribly seriously, but it's all kind of a wonderful artistic starting point for the film. And just once that kind of Eden is breached by sin, it's never going to come back. And so, we follow the events as Pocahontas does her best to keep the English alive. She's cast out from her tribe. John Smith is, punished and sent away, and she's left alone. And James Rolfe is just a nice man who takes her in. And where the movie has its ultimate emotional punch is, of course, towards the end, when she sees John Smith again and she just feels nothing for him, and she acknowledges that, and she just is happy with her son. She's her playing in the gardens with her son at the end of that movie, while James Rolfe is reciting his letter describing her death, is one of the most emotionally crushing things in film. I absolutely adore it. And it's because we've grown to love this character. We've grown to love, as she has kind of watched the Eden of her youth die out, just to never come back, and watch her grow up as a person and kind of find what it is in this world that it will create value for her. And it's marvelous and it's beautiful, and the film is just gorgeous to look at. Just the decision to always only film on overcast days feels like a weird one, but it has this magnificent effect where everything has this wonderful light diffusion that just works wonderfully well. The movie's gorgeous. It has this wonderful emotional effect by the end, and I absolutely love all of it, especially the theatrical cut. I just feel like the extended cuts are just a little, they add without adding, they add time without adding meat. So the theatrical cut is where I go. The third number one is The Tree of Life. What I come back to on this time after time is the creation of the universe, the creation of the cosmos sequence. It is gorgeous, and it has such a strong sense of awe about it. It is coming from a very specific question. It's like, what is the nature of God? And then it's answering it with scale. And, so the first 30 minutes is introduction in Terrence Malick's way, where, Jessica Chastain is dealing with the off-screen death of one of her children. And it ends, the little sequence ends with her asking in hushed voiceover, where were you when my son died? And then the answer is essentially from Job, from the book of Job, where, God comes down and says, where was I? I was creating all this. But Terrence Malick does it cinematically. We watch the creation of the universe for 30 minutes, and we watch the creation of what it is within, nature that allows us to be graceful to each other. And there are moments that absolutely just blow my mind. It's just the use of the lacrimosa and the vision of, the universe kind of spinning, or the galaxy spinning, is just gorgeous. However, the actual meat of the story is about Terrence Malick's childhood. It is about him thinking back to his childhood in Texas in the 50s, and him having to find ways to grow up between the two very different natures of his parents. His mother represents grace, his father, played by Brad Pitt, represents nature, represents something harder, something meatier, something more violent. And, how do you navigate that? And, and this is all done with the knowledge that one of the brothers is going to die, and it's going to die young. And when we actually get to kind of the big surrealistic, in terms of editing, ending that is the film, I really feel like the emotional catharsis there is finding acceptance. It is finding a way through both grace and nature to kind of move on from tragedy. It is beautiful, beautiful stuff, and I get carried away in it. So the movie is a grand achievement. It is a special effects extravaganza within about 20 to 30 minutes, within the first hour. But outside of that, it is just moments of emotional truth as a family goes through just kind of the realities of day-to-day life while dealing with an impending tragedy. And I absolutely love it. It is genuinely one of my favorite films, and I can't put it above either The New World or The Thin Red Line. I love it. And once again, we're talking about the theatrical cut. I have seen the extended cut, and again, it just feels like adding more time without adding more meat. So it's the extended cut is still like great, but I absolutely adore the theatrical cut. So that's it. That is Terrence Malick as filtered through me. The definitive ranking as to filtered through me. I love Malick. He's obviously not for everyone. Comments in my previous video are filled with people who just reject him. But I still maintain, I feel like he's doing things with enough universal appeal, just in a different medium than what people are used to, that I feel like if they got used to the medium, if they got used to his cinematic grammar, they could get into it. It's less about taste and it's more about trying to like get used to how he does things. Taste is obviously going to be part of that, but ultimately I feel like there is the ability for him to find more larger appeal than just weird cinephiles like me who, have sheer curtains laying around to dance around in. I think Terrence Malick is a genius. I think he is absolutely one of the best, if not the best filmmakers to have ever lived. I am desperate to see The Way of the Wind. I really hope he's able to finish it. And maybe he can push out like 3 quick movies right after that, like he did with The Tree of Life. Who knows? The news on The Way of the Wind keeps going back and forth between he's almost done and he's nowhere close to done. He's been editing for 7 years. Let's just finish this up. Anyway, that's Malick. I adore Malick. I feel like I could talk about Malick for years. I kind of wish I had a YouTube channel with only Malick videos, but I would get very few views. So we're going to move on. So thank you, Mr. Malick. Great films. I absolutely love them. Please finish The Way of the Wind.